Good day to you. This is Galactic from Chico, California. Over here, you'll see a diagram which you can get a quick look at one of the most significant curves I've ever seen. Quite baffling curve to a grade schooler, which is where I think we first encounter this curve, but it is quite simple. It is the equation y equals the inverse of x. The term inverse has several contextual connotations, so it could be said to have more than one definition. But in general, in a mathematical context, when we say the inverse, we're referring to the reciprocal. Inverse does have different contexts. For instance, you could say that subtraction is the inverse of addition. But if you were going to be more technically correct, which you ought to force yourself to do in science, that is the linear additive inverse. There are two inverses in mathematics. So this section of our exploration of quantum geometry will cover one of the three aspects that we are forced to cover to get a complete scientific solution. However far we get, whether we crack the problem or not, the first step in an approach to a scientific problem, according to the Polya method, which I strongly recommend you adopt, the first step in the Polya method of solving a problem is to state the problem as clearly as you can. That is a deceptively simple directive. Now, the reason I'm showing you this over here, the y equals 1 over x curve, is that you can utilize this equivalency to interpret the geometry to an advantage. Now, in quantum mechanics, the problem we're trying to solve, we're getting to that because it's very important to state it correctly because it's a paradox, which means it cannot be stated at all. And the paradox is to make the statement that defines the paradox. So it's a peculiar form of involution. And in order to break this bind, which has halted the progress of science for a century, is the quantum paradox, which we need to state quite clearly. And that is an interesting prospect for us, which we're going to get into, because there are, I believe, between 12 and 16 different contexts for the quantum paradox. In other words, it faces us at every turn. It's not yet a single problem. This has to do with the photon, the electron, and really it just goes everywhere. That we encounter this paradox between the wave and the particle. And that's just one way to say it. The paradox is that you can't say both. Either there are particles or there are waves. And if you're going to try to separate the two, to say that a wave is one thing and a particle is another, you can do so in macrospace. That is our common experiential space, which is at a certain scale. We're not the size of bacteria and we're not the size of stars. We're somewhere in between. And that's quite an interesting study to find the scale of the human organism. We are several trillion cells, which is quite a complex organism, making a human. So we have quite a prospect ahead of us because we have discerned, although it's still in the philosophical stage and has been for a century, that this quantum paradox may have a relationship and perhaps even a direct relationship that correlates the paradox we face with the nature of our consciousness. And if you know anything about quantum mechanics, and particularly the history of quantum mechanics, this has really caught on like wildfire. Because when you're facing a paradox, you have a log jam. Because more evidence is coming and you're still probing the subatomic world of particles. It's quite an interesting task to get a handle on the whole issue, because nobody can say what the issue is. This is an interesting distinction between describing what you see and explaining it. These are two separate deals. The first thing you do is describe what you see. It is a graph or a diagram. It's actually a Cartesian grid with a curve imposed upon it, or you could say superimposed. So that is the nature of a graph, that there is a background which will just say, to use a convenient term, that it is a grid, but it's not the actual space, you might say, because a grid is rather artificial. It's a bunch of squares. And actually, that's the full and complete explanation from one aspect for why we have so many squared terms in algebra. It's because we use a grid system, which naturally, as you can even see, if you can see those faint lines, the vertical and horizontal grid lines, that those are squares. Well, that's why we have the term c squared, which is the speed of light, which is a rate number, not actually, you have to be more specific when you say that that's a number. I actually discovered this, that there are exactly two kinds of numbers in this classificational approach, where you have a single component number for add, but you have a two-component number for multiply, and this curve proves the very basis of that, you could say, mathematical system. If you're using the system, the term system, you would have to define what you mean by system here, because that's quite an abstract term. But we do have an additive system, which is extremely appropriate and really designed for linear spatial separation measurements, which we call distance. That's on a straight line, and that's Euclid. So that sums up really about 3,000 years of history in both geometry and mathematics. What is it? Well, it started with add, which is a linear progression of units that are all the same, so that you have what's called a metric, which in this case is distance. Metric refers to what you are measuring. The metric of the space for this space is linear spatial separation, but now you have to say something else, because there are two baselines, and that's called x and y, which makes squares. Because they're orthogonal, which is a specific relationship between two objects called lines, and they're the same object, but one is rotated, but you see it's the same object that's just transposed to a new orientation. Well, it's that change of orientation that squares the plane. And that's magic in itself, because there's no way to dig under that relationship. It's built into, you could say, the universe. It's built into our perceptual system. Is perpendicular, which is a relationship, to another line which makes a right angle where they cross, and that would be a point. The relationship between y and x, where the relationship being established is on an operator, of which we are taught four, but it does depend on how you define operator. There are actually, in the basic mathematical system, two pairs of operators, and subtraction is the additive inverse of addition, and this is the corresponding relationship in the multiplicative system, which is a different number system. Although that's a strange thing to say, because we're using the same basic numbers. It's just that they're constructed differently. What is constructed differently and how? It's difficult to state completely. And that is a typical problem that goes to the Gödel incompleteness theorem, which goes back to what's called an axiomatic basis. The most important aspect of the system on a recursion to get your base terms. There's quite a process to establish even the words you're using. What I'm attempting to describe is how complex that is going to turn out to be. How would you know where the limit is beyond which you can't measure? So how do you know where that limit is? You try to use rational logic, or mathematical logic is what is being used, because really these poor scientists are down to the numbers. They can't explain why their numbers either work or don't work. Mechanics is conceived to be sequential, but dynamics is more related to energy, which is not particulate. Energy is not material. It's exactly what material is not. But then we find out, of course, through E equals mc squared that they're related. And matter is energy. They're simply in two different, you could say, states, but that's not precisely true. They're in two different forms. Well, that's rather as abstract as you can get. Can you be more specific? No. Nobody yet has been able to be more specific than that. At the inner limit, where you would either measure a particle or a wave, you don't know how to do that. And that just baffles the bejeepers out of us. It has for a century. So it's the hottest topic in town on that thread. It's where science stops, you understand. We don't like science to stop. We're trying to get answers. Well, now you have to ask yourself some real reflexive and introspective questions about why are you so intent on understanding what it is you think you don't understand. You're able to measure things, and you're confident that the laws of physics are upheld insofar as what you're seeing. You've simply reached the inner scale beyond which your physical limitations make it impossible for you to see further in. Well, we want to know where that is so that we know where we have to stop. But there's where we just can't make any progress because we can't explain what happens between two states, where there's a time lapse, and that defines the difference between the two states. Well, you want a mechanical explanation. When you go from the cause to effect, you would like to have a curve that describes what's happening on some quantity. Well, that's where it breaks. We can isolate two states. Time just keeps moving, right? So you have a state, but time is moving. So then you measure it again, with or without something changing. But when you take the second measurement, it simply cannot be the same as the first measurement because time has altered what is. So time is continuous in this way of analysis. And that baffles us because what we're trying to do is isolate a position. But when you do that, you're not just isolating the position in space. You also have a timestamp, and that's the nature of relativity. The measurement of the passage of time is considered to be constant, certainly in local time. For that, you see, here's where it just gets so strange. Because what if you could conceive of a situation on a timeline? So now let's say you have these two entangled particles. Entanglement is not a positive comment on the system. It's entangled. Well, burn it then. It's bramble. Well, the right term is coordinated, and that, of course, makes a lot more geometric sense. There is an historical reason why it's called entanglement. It has to do with logic. It's a logic entanglement called superposition. And you may have heard this term, it's a Dirac term. And I've made quite a bit of progress in explaining what is superposition. Oh man, is that an important, fruitful topic. Everything that I deal with is now related, which is part of the goal. So what we have over here is really the world's simplest curve, just seen from the point of view of one of the two basic operators, which are in pairs. This shows one of the pairs. Now it's kind of deceptive in the way we use notation, how we make our marks for variables. We use letters, which are simply placeholders for any number that's allowed in the domain of that number. So you have an example of that domain range in this simple equation, but it's not written correctly. It's quite delicate, and I really am a nitpicker on this for cutting edge work. You can't have a term that's not quite defined correctly. And even just to get it off a little can be disastrous in interpretation. It's not written correctly when it's y equals 1 over x. You've made a mistake when you write it like that. So why are you writing the equation at all if everything is just fucking implied? That's the whole reason for having an equation. This graph is not the graph of 1 over x, because that has no meaning. Just to say it's 1 over x is incorrect completely, because it's not even an equation. A graph with showing a curve like this, what you want is the equation of the line. And that's an interesting definition. What do you mean by equation? Well, it refers to the equal side, of course, where the quantity on one side is the same as the quantity on the other side, but they're written in different terms. Really the relationship between y and x. So what this is the relationship between y and x. Well, if you wrote y equals x, it would be a diagonal line going up like this from the origin along the diagonal that hits all the whole number intersections, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. It'll give you the interpolated values. 1 over x is a relationship between 1 and x, and the relationship is the operator. We call it division, and that's again incorrect, but that's another topic. You can call it division if you're careful in how you define division. We have never been careful in how we define division, and I've proved that. The whole nature of my discovery is the nature of that second number, which is a fraction, which we insist on writing as one number as if it were one number. Well, now you see where the whole system busts. It just breaks open because this is not a correct definition of that curve at all. It's an incorrect definition of that curve because one of the components is y without any relation to any other number. But the number on the other side is x, but it is related to another number. It's related to the number 1. So I hope that gives you a clue. And now here's your quiz, which is always meant to just give you the answer, but to make you think first, which is often helpful. It's at the discretion of the teacher to introduce that tactic. But introducing a quiz at key moments can be enormously helpful. An exam is just the opposite. That's when you just fucking commit suicide rather than take that motherfucking exam because your life depends on the outcome and you know you're going to fail. That's what an exam is meant to do. It's meant to crush you. It's meant to ruin you. It's meant to get you out of the system if you're undergoing a test. The test is not positive. The test is to have you taken away and needled. You're going to be taken to the pound and killed. You're going to McDonald's, honey. You're not passing this test. That's the end of your fucking life. So you either pass this test or you're a homeless person, okay? That's what an exam is. Goddamn educational system. Fucking assholes. Anyway, I have quite a history of hatred against the educational system, although it was good to me. So I'm being a hypocrite, although I don't think so. Anyway, I have a lot of issues that accrue to an old man that I shouldn't burden you with, but you just saw a really ugly part of me come out. And I'm sorry. But let's get to the point. What's my answer? What do I think this should be? It's y over 1. It's y over 1. Y over 1 equals 1 over x. Then you can see the relationship and the graph suddenly makes sense. Can you state how? Do you see where this curve is balanced? It's balanced on a number. What number? I think you can tell. Remember, if this were the equation, if this equation were inverted so that it were to draw some other graph, what would be the most logical comparator for this curve? Is quite a gentle curve, isn't it? It's a beautiful curve. It's symmetrical. Where's the turning point for the symmetry? Where's the center of the symmetry? I think you can guess. if you don't already know. And I'll use my pointer here. I think I finally figured out how to use this pointer. Can you see that? I hope you can see that pointer. Because there are two pointers, and now I can see the other pointer, but I don't think you can. I have two pointers because one is for one screen and the other one is for the other, and this system shows you both. But then you have to figure out which is which, and I've gotten it wrong every time until now, and I'm still not sure. I think that was the wrong. Here comes the real pointer, I hope. So what if this said y equals x? Well, you could say y over 1 equals x over 1 because we fool ourselves into thinking that that's exactly the same thing as saying y equals x. Well, mathematically, you could actually prove that they are the same, but only if you make a certain assumption, which you're going to regret that you fucking made, and every mathematician makes that assumption, and I've caught them with their goddamn pants down. So I'm leading up to a major, major insight, which is going to put you ahead of the entire mathematical community, which I think is a preposterous, arrogant statement, but I'm a scientist and I have to be honest, no matter how ugly it makes me seem. I'm just stating what I've observed, not putting my own consciousness onto the equivalency. So y over 1 equals x over 1, what would that look like? Well, you can plot it. It's really, just think of it as y equals x. But it's really not, because there are two numbers on this graph. Well, if you say that the y component is equal to the x component in the space, then you have 1, 1, and you have 2, 2, and you can draw a line through these numbers. It's a diagonal that goes up. Am I doing this right? Oh yeah, oh, no. It goes like this. Well, let's use the fucking pointer. So here's 0, 0, and you just draw it right up here through the diagonal, and that will be y equals x. Well, it crosses this 1, 1 point. So the 1, 1 point is one of the points that y over x will hit. Well, it turns out then that y equals x is equivalent to saying that y over 1 equals 1 over x at that point. And why would that be true? It's because of the number 1 in the numerator and denominator. The 1 is in the numerator on the right side. It's 1 over x. But on the other side, it's reversed, which is called the reciprocal. It shouldn't be called the inverse, because the inverse has more than one connotation. The additive inverse would be the inverse of add, which is subtract, but that's linear. This is not linear, and that's the point. This is well, you can see it's nonlinear. That's one of the things that the curve tells you. But if it's y equals x, it's this line that goes up that exactly divides the curve. So the curve is balanced at the point 1, 1. And you can see that this curve is symmetrical with this curve. But what's the difference between this side of the curve and this side of the curve? Because this curve that ends at 1, 1 is not oriented the same way as this curve. And what's the relationship between this curve and this curve? The equation actually tells you what is the relationship between this vertically oriented curve and this horizontally oriented curve. Well, just by talking it out, you've discovered perpendicularity in curved space, because this curve is exactly orthogonal to this curve. And the only place where it's balanced is at the 1, 1 point. And 1 occurs on both sides of the equation. So the 1, 1 point is the coordinator of the relationship between y and x. So you can say that y is proportional to x. Y is proportional to x What does that mean? It means that when you take the reciprocal of x, which is the statement 1 over x, that means compute the reciprocal of x. So you do that. Let's say you plug in 2. So now this side of the equation says 1/2. So if 1/2 is on this side of the equation when x is equal to 2, you can read over here to see what y is when x is equal to 2. And when x is equal to 2, y will be equal to this whole value, which is the reciprocal of x. So y will be the reciprocal of x. What would that look like? Well, what's the reciprocal of x? It's 1 over x. So we have the reciprocal of x here. The reciprocal of x, which is this value. Now, you don't know what the value is until you plug in x. So if you plug in x, you get 1/2. So y is equal to 1/2 when x is 2. So that's the relationship between y and x. When x is 2, y is the reciprocal of 2. So why do I say that this is written incorrectly? It's because it doesn't show the relationship, which you can see on the graph is 1. And in matrix, this is your simple 101 introduction to matrix mathematics if you've never been able to wrap your head around it. This is matrix mathematics because you can write the two numbers next to each other as a 2x2 grid. Don't let this baffle you. It's so easy to let this just, what the hell? Just, there are 4 numbers. On this left side, you have y over 1, and on the other side, you have 1 over x. Well, that is a very clear relationship. You can actually see the geometry of the relationship in the matrix, which is what makes a 2x2 matrix so powerful, because there is a way to manipulate that object called the matrix, which has an internal relationship built in called conjugal mathematics. This is fairly well known, but it's not often explained to this depth in this context. But the relationship between y and x can be one of 2 relationships such that you can plot it on a Cartesian grid. They are 2 values. One is the y value, and one is the x value. So how might you relate them together? You could say y equals x, and draw the graph of that. That would be that diagonal line that neatly bisects this curve. So this straight line going through the curve is related to the curve. It's the linearization of the curve, which you can see is perpendicular to the curve. Where they intersect, right here and only here, the straight line going through this curve at the infinitesimal, which is a point, the infinitesimal point, you need to do calculus to derive this, but in this case it's a very easy calculus equation. I suppose the easiest of all. It's easy to, you can see that that's a very simple number. The number 1 is the simplest number of all because it's just 1. It's no muss or fuss, it's just 1. Of course, then you have to define what you mean by that in some way. And we get into the Gödel recursion again. But this all works if you do it right. It's just interesting to try to decompose what's being done because that's what we need to do now to get into quantum mechanics. Where did we go wrong? I discovered where we went wrong. And the solution is absolutely, overwhelmingly magnificent because it literally unlocks everything that we have been unable to unlock for a century. So that sounds almost trollish, like I have some kind of mental problem that I need to project onto science. I hope not. I can't completely rule that out because I don't have any consensual review. Well, it's kind of hard to review someone's work if they don't produce a paper. So once again, for the third year in a row, I'm promising myself and you that I will write that paper. But I'm telling you the truth, the God's honest truth, as honest as I can be, because it's unforgivable that I haven't written this goddamn paper. And it's not that I don't want to, it's that I don't have time. And that just sounds like the sickest, most pathetic cop out. No, you're just lazy or you're scared. Come on, Scott. That's not true. And you're just going to have to take my word for it because I'm being honest. The reason I haven't written this paper is because it would distract me. Because these past 3 years have been an explosion of insights. And it's gone hyperbolic, just like the Industrial Revolution just kind of ran off the rails. This has run off the rails. Now, it's overwhelmingly good, but I have to maintain my composure. It's like riding a wave on a surfboard. You have to have total attention on what you're doing. I can't afford to write a paper. It would distract me from something much more important. But then you see, that's kind of personal and selfish. Yeah, I'm of that age where it's me, baby. I'm doing me. But you see, I'm still trying to project through the media available to me, not a paper, which is just criminal negligence. I can't get out of that. I'm absolutely guilty. To myself, to everybody. Where is your paper? For God's sake! You say that you've made a discovery? Well, write a paper! That's the next step! Nobody's gonna know. And nobody's gonna hear you until we read your paper. Well, there may be some psychological issues. I actually know there are. Because this is going to be attacked by like a pack of wild dogs to just tear it to shreds. Just don't let it grow like I shot the sheriff. Kill it before it grows. That's what, well, nobody wants to face that. Just total hatred of your whole community. Just, your theory is shit. You, you, you didn't read this. You don't know this. This is wrong. You just got this backwards. You're crazy. And they just rip it up in front of your eyes and throw it at you. Just let it settle like confetti. You stupid false scientist. Well, I may have some trepidation. You know what I'm saying? I'm human. I'm sensitive. I don't want to be kicked around like a goddamn cur. So I think yeah, it's kind of a therapeutic outpouring there. Just, yeah, he's sick. He has troubles. That poor old man. Well, in the meantime, I'm sharing with you my joy of these tremendous insights and these simplest of all curves. So why is it that I'm showing you this curve? Let's get to the point and wrap this up in an hour. It's to show you two infinities. This curve is so profound, it's just unfucking real. So let me explain that so you can actually understand my ecstasy. When you say y equals x, that's called a linear equation because there's no conversion. It's just whatever y is, x is the same value. So that's pretty easy. You just bisect it with a diagonal. I always do that. It goes up like this. Well, let's use our pointer. This is y equals x. Well, that is the conjugal inverse of the curve, which transcends dimensionality. So this is extremely profound, and if you actually were a wizard, you'd be able to with just a little bit of cogitation, solve the quantum paradox and a whole universe more of insights that are so valuable, they're actually critical at this time, and I've got it all. So I should be given a lot of money. So, yeah, there's a lot of psychological issues, I think. But I've never really had a relationship with money. Money seems to try to avoid me, and I'm like, good, because I don't like you. Get away from me. I don't like money. Well, you can see I probably would keep that to myself for most of my life, because otherwise I'd have a pack of people following me. This is a guy who just doesn't like money. Well, there are a lot of other people who love money. You might think, well, this poor old man is a hypocrite. He fucking loves money or he wouldn't be alive. Can't get out of that one. So, yeah, did I sell my soul? Well, there's mercy and grace from on high. You can still be rescued. I'm living proof of that. And if you don't believe that, too bad. I think I'm fine. Of course, I do have soul searching all the time before the Lord, because you do want to stay fine with the Lord. You don't want to get on the bad side of your creator, because he can uncreate you probably pretty easily. Well, I don't want to be uncreated, but it's not really up to me. But we do have a conjugality with the universe and therefore with the creator. So you can pray and plead for forgiveness and get down on your face and cry your eyes out and pray for the extension of your life into another dimension after you're dead. I think that's pretty much the whole story of religion, isn't it? You're scared, you don't understand the universe. There's people fighting, there's torture and bloodshed and horror. And you've seen things no man should see by the age of 7. And you're just sick of life, you don't know what to do. Well, turn your eyes to heaven and see if maybe the Lord will answer you. That's kind of like religion in a sappy sense. But you have to take care of yourself, If you're afraid of death, well, you probably need a religious solution, because otherwise, you're out of luck because you're going to die. Sorry. So if you're afraid of death, well, then you're going to stay scared. I'm sorry. Well, that's not very helpful. Can we scientists contribute? Yes, we'd better, because any religious solution had better pass physics, or you're pretty much got pie in the sky by and by that's probably not going to be by and by in this universe, because you just made it up, because you need to make something up to justify your existence. Well, that would be false religion, but you won't know it until you're roasting in hell forever when it's too late. I know, but isn't this an amazing game? This game, I just never get tired of this game. I really do want to live, just because, my God, what's next? I mean, we have these bodies that are really resilient and versatile, but really small and limited from another aspect, really finite, easily crushed, easily burned, easily just dead. Just as well, he's no longer alive. He got something happened to him and now he's no longer with us. It's like, what? And when that's Yeshua, the savior of the earth, no, the Jews killed him and he had to leave and it looks like he won't be back. Well, shit. You pray to God, will Jesus come back? And then, well, you're a religious man now, because the only man that could have helped anybody or the earth was murdered, and then he had to leave. And if he comes back, the Jews will kill him again. So he's not coming back. The earth won't be saved or healed, and neither will you be, because Jesus was rejected. Well, it turns out that that's the greatest news of all time. I would have to say that, just superficially, just using common sense, that doesn't sound like good news at all. It sounds like the worst news you could possibly get. Well, he was here, the one that was designated to just fix everything. Just all we had to do is accept him and do what he, shows us what to do. He's here to save us, heal us, and just fix everything. Well, no. He was rejected. It's like, I didn't reject him. Well, that's the good news. He says, well, I hope you don't reject me like my own people did. And that's the invitation of the gospel. You don't have to die. I did. Something like that. It's like, I came to die so that you don't have to worry about it. If I can die, you can die, and it's not something I worry about, neither should you. That's not exactly what he said, I don't think. I'm just putting this into terms like when someone encounters Christianity, it's like, well, what is it you believe that's so exciting? Because it's obvious you're happy. Well, that's a very human reaction. Why are you so excited about this? What is the gospel? I would like to know what it is. And usually, I would assume would be normal. The people who are excited about the good news, if someone asks about it, they get excited. Well, the Jehovah's Witnesses certainly do until you find out they don't really want to share the gospel with you necessarily. What they want to do is drag you into their church so you can start contributing money. That's true. That's all the Jehovah's Witnesses do is try to drum up money. And the same thing is true of the Seventh-day Adventists. All they want is money. And believe me, I was with the Seventh-day Adventists for 15 years. They're just like any other church. They want money. They don't want to save your soul. They don't want to spread the word of Jesus. They want to make a living. And they use these poor N-word people, such as myself or any other poor churchgoer, to just, that is a source of cash. Your cash cows. That's what a church is. It's all about money, not about anything else. When money is involved, nothing else is involved. And you know, this has led to a lot of trouble, to put it mildly. But that's an hour. We have overrun our limit here. And I don't think I gave you very much, and I apologize. But I want to give you the bright side of this, even though I didn't get far into showing you the conjugation of infinity, which you're actually looking at, and you may have figured it out by now. This introduces the multiplicative number system, which I discovered. Nobody has ever used multiplication and division correctly geometrically, ever. I discovered how to use multiplication and division. And it's a completely different number system that solves all the problems in mathematics. And that is such a wildly preposterous statement that I wouldn't blame you if you just went, you know what, I don't think this channel has what I need. This guy is off on some kind of rampage, and he's never going to convey anything useful to me. Well, if you feel that way, may Allah give you peace on your path. I no hard feelings. I perfectly understand why you think that I'm out of my fucking mind, which I certainly don't take personally. Because as scientists, our job is to make sure that we're not adding something to science that is just incorrect, because that's going to affect other people. You have to guard that. Well, whose job is it to guard the store of knowledge from which we all drink or eat? You see, that's you don't want some nutcase such as myself saying, I've got the answer. You know how many thousands, God, uncountable numbers of jackasses have done exactly the same thing in some context or, oh, I've got it. I've got it. Like the solution to some, ancient mathematical problem. I got it. This happens all the time. It's actually the legacy of science itself. I've got it. But you see, 999,000 times out of 1,000,000. In other words, most of the time, the person is wrong. They don't have it. And it's just a question of the temperament of the person projecting themselves. They're just almost always, almost without exception, it's to get money. You want to get the fucking money, for God's sake. Fuck truth, fuck science, fuck everybody. I've got to have that money. And if you go far enough with that insatiable desire for money, which sustains your life, by the way, that's how it's construed, is without money you're going to die. So you're really just trying to preserve your life by just doing anything, literally anything, to get that motherfucking goddamned money. For money! I need money! Well, then you start murdering people. It's the next step. It's obviously the next step. I need your money. Give it to me or I will take it from you. That's called a government. And that's enough. Thank you for your patience. In the next video, I will be showing you conjugal infinity, which leads to an amazing wonderland of truth, which you may be sorely in need of, considering the state of mathematics is now perfectly designed and its only purpose is to drive you out of your fucking mind so that you die. It's your enemy, and your mathematicians are bona fide murderers. They're the most immoral fuckers who have ever lived. And don't ever trust a mathematician. Ever. Especially a physicist. That's all they do is lie. They never tell the truth, and they're sworn to do that, or the government will cut off their money. And that's how you get these models that just live on by themselves and just dictate to us, like Satan himself just planted his ass on the face of science and said, "You're from monkeys, the universe is expanding, and there are parallel universes." And shut up, because that's what the government says. So fuck you, you're not getting any money unless you toe the fucking propaganda line. There is no religion, there's no God, there's no such thing as Jesus, there's no salvation, there's no hope. We, the white scientists, the mathematicians, have proved it with our satanic numbers. So that's why I take a hard line. It's to the death. And if you succumb to the mathematicians and their goddamn new Vatican of goddamn satanic Catholics making you lick their asses, you're a sap. Don't ever believe a mathematician. They're absolute liars. They never tell the truth. Ask a mathematician or a physicist right away before listening to a word they say. Ask them straight up. Are you a Christian? What's your religious outlook? Do you believe in God? And if there's any vacillation, drop them. Drop that person. You don't have to be mean. You just got a fact. I need to know who you are before I believe a fucking word that comes out of your fucking mouth. What do you think about God, wise guy? Ed Witt, the Jew? How come you didn't ask him that, Brian Greene, the Jew? Yeah, how come all these Jews are interviewing each other and they all hate God? Is that anti-Semitism? Is it? Is that anti-Semitism to say the Jews all seem to be atheists now? Is that fair? Is that racist? I leave that up to you, and I'm not saying one way or the other. But those two men are Jews. The most famous interview in the history of science just took place about a week ago between Brian Greene, one of the chief Zionist Jews of all time, and Ed Witt, who appears to be brain dead. I don't think that man has very much intelligence, but he's very good at lying. And all he did in that interview was, from start to finish, one gigantic lie. All that man did was lie. And Brian Greene is much more guilty than Ed Witt. Ed Witt is simply trying to preserve his image as the powerful pope, which he did well enough by doing what popes do. He lied in his teeth. He absolutely contradicted all the premises of science in order to destroy you. Does Ed know that? I would bet money that he doesn't, although I actually wouldn't. He probably doesn't, but Brian Greene definitely does. Brian Greene knows exactly what he's doing. And you could say the same thing about a lot of Jewish comedians like Bill Maher, a rabid, frothing at the mouth Zionist, one of the most dangerous personalities I've ever encountered. But whenever I see these personalities who are embedded in your life, they're your gods. And they know it. They know that they have power over you. Bill Mayer is demonically possessed. So's Lex Friedman. They all are. Do they know it? I don't think so. So I can't go ad hominem and say they're evil men. I don't think they are. I think they're stupid men. I think they're ignorant and they should not be scientists. They should not be talking about anything on their platform because they're liars. They couldn't tell a true word if they had to. First of all, they don't believe in God. Well, that's the end. If you don't believe in God, you're not a scientist, you're a liar. No atheist is sane. You either believe in God or you're not human, darling. And that goes for any Jew or anybody else. See, the Jews are supposed to be religious people. If you're not religious, you're not a Jew. So don't even use the word Jew. It's the stupidest term. You realize that's a racist term? To say Jew at all. Well, I'm forced to say it because there is one strange fucking situation going on with Israel right now, isn't there? Well, that affects the Jews. Whether you're innocent or not no longer matters. If you're a Jew, you're fucking involved whether you like it or not. Because Israel claims to be made of Jews. Is that true? I leave it to you to decide for yourself, but the answer is no. There's no such thing as a Jew. So I couldn't be anti-Semitic if I wanted to because that means nothing. You're anti what? The Semites? What do you mean by Semite? Nobody can answer that. There's no such thing as a Semite, for fuck's sake. You're talking about DNA when you talk about Jews. Their DNA different? No, they're not different. You know why? It's because we're all human. And nothing overrides that. If you're born black, if you're born white, if you're born Jew, is there any difference between those? It's superpositional, but the correct answer is no, because that's been scientifically proved. You can take that to the bank. So in that sense, you're perfectly legitimate in stating, no, you're not a Jew. I don't care what you call yourself. If you claim to be a Jew, you're a liar. And that's in the Bible. Those are called false Jews. And that's what's destroying the world, is not Jews. It's false Jews. Men who actually believe that they are Jews. Really? Well, you're not alone, because Hitler thought you were all the same too. Are you? How are you all the same? How does a Jew identify himself as being a Jew because of your DNA? Then you are not a scientist, you're an idiot. So let's try again. What the fuck do you mean by Jew? I don't care if you are a Jew or if you're someone who believes that you hate Jews. Are you being rational at all? Not at all. Not in any way are you being rational. Because you believe, perhaps religiously, because it's certainly not scientifically, you believe there's such a thing as a Jew. Is there? Then what is it? What is a Jew? There is no definition for that. None. What? Netanyahu is a Jew? He's as far from being a Jew as a man can get. Oh, he has DNA that can be traced back to what? Abraham? So can the rocks. That's kind of a paraphrase of an interesting statement by Yeshua. I say unto you that God can raise up sons of Abraham from these rocks. It's quite a statement by the Master, speaking of his father, for whom he had ultimate respect, but this is really invoking the power of God. You Jews, in the day when there were Jews, because Jesus was a Jew, he was the last Jew, but he was talking to other Jews. And he said, you Jews claim Abraham as your father, but you don't do what Abraham did. And don't say to me that because you're sons of Abraham, in other words, because you're Jews, that makes you special. Because you're just as special as these rocks on the ground. That's how special you are. You're not special at all. That's what Jesus said as a Jew. A meaningless concept. Meaningless. So what's all the hullabaloo about the Jews? It's because there are a lot of men who believe that they're Jews. They never changed. No country. Their temple destroyed. Their king murdered by their own leaders. No country. No future. But all through Europe, where they spread, 2,000 years ago, they had to spread because the Romans kicked them out, according to the Mosaic curse. Get out of the Holy Land. You're out. Well, look, some of them came back. Who came back? There's nobody to come back. There's nowhere to come back to. So what is this hoax going on in Israel? There is a very sound religious answer. The prophets expose the whole thing. Daniel, Yeshua, Johann the Revelator, all the Israeli prophets damned Israel to hell. All Jews, fuck you all. The reason why that couldn't be done before Christ is because Jesus had to be born in Judah. The elect one was prophesied to be of the tribe of Judah thousands of years before he was born. That one would come from the tribe of Judah. That's a Jew. So Jesus was a Jew for that reason. But that's the only reason for the Jews, was to make Jesus. Well, I think you know what happened to that good man. And that's the story of religion, where it meets the enemy, and Yeshua took the fall. And that's why it's said that he received our stripes that we deserved, because he didn't deserve what happened to him. He never did anything wrong. So who set up this little game? His father did. His father sacrificed his own son in our open sight to show how much he loves us. If you don't like that, I wonder if you are even human. That there's something about that just bothers you. But you don't know what it is, but you're willing to kill other people out of your hatred of what? God? Because you had your fanny poked or spanked when you were too helpless to resist in the church. So you hate anybody who's associated with God or Jesus. Does that describe you rather accurately? That you're brain dead? Well, then Satan has raped you. And you're probably not going to get up from that because you like it. Because you're evil. And that's just the way it is, honey. Take it or leave it. You don't believe in God? Don't talk. Do not tell others what you know, because you don't know anything. Okay? That's pretty simple, I think. So as for your hatred of religion or distrust of religions, too bad. If you're not a man, get out of the kitchen. If you can't stand the heat, go slit your wrists. But don't you criticize someone who actually knows God, or you will pay for that eventually. And there's no way out of that, no matter what you and I say, think, or feel. So don't get in my way, or I will crack you out of the way. All right? because there's not much time left and there are not many voices like mine. So there's your scientific insight. I hope you got something out of this. Keep looking up. There's a new moon coming in just a few days. The most holy time, and you are going to learn religion from me, or you're not going to be in my presence, because I will teach you religion whether you like it or not, honey. Okay? Because this isn't for you. I'm talking over your shoulder to the future generations who need to hear my voice. They need to hear my voice right now. How come I don't have a public platform? There's a lot of reasons, but I'm not getting any help at all. That's unacceptable. You're going to help me now, or you get the fuck out of my sight because I can't stand you. You're either with me or you get lost. Don't just tag along because you find me interesting or titillating. Get your ass out of my business because I'm doing this for good. What are you doing? Go kiss your puppy. And may peace be upon you. Maybe you be subject to the love of your Creator so that you recognize it and become happy and wholesome and beneficial to others. That's your destiny. Whether you choose to pursue it or not is entirely up to you and your master Satan. Okay? We'll be right back. Thank you.
And I mean that kindly. We're all idiots in the eyes of the universe.